Hello and welcome back. It's MC1 Gamer. I am here with Kieran Dunleavy to go and unlock and go over the High Elf War Scrolls. Thanks for joining us, Kieran. A man who every night warms himself under the blanket of which is actually the old Banner of the World Dragon from the old world.
Yes, that and the white lions of Crace, which I've slain with my own bare hands.
So, admittedly, you're a longtime High Elf player, so I really thought of you when I wanted to do this one. I mean, I had a couple people in mind, but you know, I really appreciate your coming on board and spending the time to go and take a look at the all the different war scrolls. Any initial impressions of Age of Sigmar that you care to share from your recent experiences?
Well, as I said to you offline, just a few moments ago, I'm glad for this opportunity, first off, because I need a little more Age of Sigmar in my life. I think the group that I generally game with are still very busy with 8th edition. Like, we still play games 2 to 3 times a week of 8th edition, so there hasn't been a ravenous desire to get into Age of Sigmar because we're not missing 8th edition yet. But it's going to go that way, so I need more of it.
No, that's good. There's nothing wrong with doing both. There's nothing wrong with keeping the flames alive, and there's nothing wrong with jumping in with the new version of Warhammer either.
Exactly.
All right, so let's get to it. You know, I'm hoping to do this somewhere around an hour. My wife would certainly appreciate that. But so I'm going to go ahead and pull them up, and we'll start. The format for anybody else who's maybe new to the series. We're going to we'll try to get to the special characters on the tail end. If we don't, I'll have, like with others, I'm going to try to do another hangout, and hopefully, Kieran, you can come on board and do that again, where we can discuss it if we don't fit it in today. One of the other formats is we're going to go and we're going to discuss any opinions on how we might utilize what we think of these particular units, heroes, and whatnot. And then we're going to go over the formations. Now, before we even jump in, I've got a special guest tomorrow. I'm going to be doing dwarves with Andy 2D6. At some point in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to redo the Skaven one. Unfortunately, some technical issues that were rampant around YouTube. It wasn't just me. A lot of live streams earlier in the week got corrupted. So I'm going to have Remington Steele on again. We're going to, sometime in the next couple of weeks, we're going to do that. And I'm going to take a break over the weekend and actually spend some time with the family. And maybe I'll get a couple of these out for next week, just for anybody else who wants to keep track and tune in for any future ones. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and share the screen, and we'll see if we can get this ball rolling.
Yeah. So as a sum up, Mitch, how many of these have you knocked down so far?
I think this might be the 7th or 8th.
Oh yeah, so you're halfway. Stands right now halfway there.
I'm getting there. I mean, I'm trying to get as many of these in as I can. Let me see if this is working here. Hold on. There we go. How's that?
Looks like High Elves.
All right, good. It works. I'm always a little nervous that maybe I'm not going to get that right. All right, I'm going to go lock that in, so hopefully that'll stay on the screen. Yeah, I mean, I banged out a bunch of them. The Beastman one was a little bit unfortunate. I did Skaven, Bretts, Dark Elves, Tomb Kings. I'm hoping to do with Paul Kierhart, Lizardmen. I was going to do Ogres, but Paul had done Ogres. I might redo Ogres somewhere down the line. Let's see. Bretts was with Ant. Trying to think if I missed any. I'm waiting for John Talaby for Vampire Counts. He hasn't got back to me with the schedule, so I'm starting to bang these out. But yeah, eventually we're going to get to a point where I think I'm going to start, getting into the Chaos ones, because there's a lot of wonderful controversies revolving around some of the Chaos ones. But we're trying to move through these. And then the next thing that I'm going to do after that is then I'm going to look at synergies. We'll see, who's available from the guys, or maybe even there's new people that I'll bring on board, because there's obviously 4 different factions, like destruction, death, order, etc. And there's multiples within, and then we could see how we might build lists within those faction keywords. But hey, one thing at a time, right?
Yeah, you know what? That's an excellent idea though, because I think people immediately out of the gates are still staying homogenous with their armies.
Yeah.
Without exploring that whole ally and blending. So I think that's a great idea to explore.
No, I lost my my earphone. Let me just plug that in. Yeah, I agree. I've seen that a lot with on the table with games I've observed, and with some of the games that I played, people I played against. I'm still doing undead legions effectively. You know, I'm throwing in a some archers or a higher titan along with my mainly vampire counts focus. But yeah, I think that the next evolution, once people get comfortable with their main army, is seeing what they can do in combination, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's lots to explore for sure.
All right, let's get to the high elves. Okay, we're gonna bypass the lesser gods, Tyrion and Teclis, because that's what they kind of are right now, and we'll go right to the high elf prince. So why don't you go and let's start with you as the guest. Take the first one.
Okay, well, first thing that I want to talk about is uniquely in the description, and there's been a bit of discussion about this and the array of weapons that a guy has. So it kind of goes through and it gives you a description of what this guy could be carrying for the sake of encompassing all the models that you might own or have already converted. But I want to point out that it sort of hasn't paired up a little bit. So for example, if you're on foot, you can just have a blade or a pole arm. If you're on a horse, then you can have the star lance. Right. So in other words, you can't have the star lance if you're running around on your own 2 feet, right? So they help you with that sort of delineation and distinction. Now, when we look through there, it also leaves the option open for your prince to be your battle standard bearer, and in this case, he would carry the Phoenix banner. So it is again encompassing all the models that you can own, and then talks about the differences between them. It also talks about the fact that you can give up all those things, your fancy melee weapons, to have a reaver bow instead, and get some range weapons.
There's an interesting idea. Yeah.
So very much like the Prince of Old, like if you've ever looked at the 8th edition army book and looked under the heading, the entry of High Elf Prince, it takes up like 3/4 of a page because of all the options that the guy can have. Mm. And comparatively, as it crosses over here, it feels the same way. It feels like you have a bevy of options and you can be on a horse. And then as we see below, you can put him on a Griffin and various other things. So he's a guy that is going to offer up a lot of different things to the toolbox, is my general impression. But the favorite of all of them is probably the thing you saw the least, and that's the polearm, just because it simply hits and wounds at an easier rate and damages at die 3 compared to the other single damaging sort of things.
And it's one of the few that has a rend.
That's right. Yeah, that and the Star Lance, but of course you can only have the Star Lance when you're mounted.
Yeah, and you get a bonus with the Star Lance on a charge, but I still like that die 3.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. You still wound on a 3 when you're charging, which you're likely to be doing. But let's touch on a couple other things. One being the Phoenix banner that allows you to reroll battle shock tests for a pretty big range, like a 20-inch range, which is going to be a third of your battlefield in most cases. Yeah. Right? Like that's a pretty big radius that you get to offer that to. So you can feel pretty safe about losing a few guys in combat and knowing that the prince is going to save you from losing much more. And then there's one other item in here that I thought I see it repeat itself a few times with the heroes of the High Elves, and that's that enchanted shield, making them more resilient than you would think. They have a 4+ save to begin with, but when you're re-rolling all of them unconditionally, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I'm noticing that seems to be a trend in a lot of the army books. You'll have a mechanic that is kind of the flavor of I wouldn't say army book. I should refrain from using that because I've been such a defender of the concept of these are war scrolls under themes and keywords and factions as opposed to army books. They're really not army books anymore. But there's a theme within the High Elves that, with the enchanted shield. And we're also going to see, and we're not seeing this in the High Elf Prince, but just a little foreshadowing. a lot of the mechanics that we know from the High Elves duplicated with some of the standard abilities for the various units, and we'll get into that. But they have there's a lot of opportunity for these guys to to hit and save as a result of these mechanics. They kind of they emulate a lot of the flavor that they had in 8th edition as a result, and that Enchanted Shield is definitely one of them. They can stand in there and they are very precise.
Yeah, and I kind of hypothesize that it's a bit of a nod towards their high weapon skill and their good martial prowess. I mean, weapon skill is not a stat in Age of Sigmar, of course, but this sort of just is a way of reflecting, hey, we're agile, we're nimble, and we're hard for you to land a good telling blow on.
I agree, and there's sometimes this doesn't work, but there are times, especially if you're a legacy player where you've come from previous editions, where you'll see the mechanic, and if you really look into it and look over this in depth, that's one of the reasons why I've been doing these videos, is to try and bring out some of these little gems that we might discover. And there's plenty of commentary that I've been getting from others that kind of point out stuff that I just missed on my first pass or two, which I love. But it really does. Like you said, it's a wink and a nod to some of what they used to be. They've done a pretty good job. Every once in a while, there's one that doesn't quite do a good enough job. But for the most part, I think they've been pretty good about it, and I think they've captured that with the High Elves. What do you think of the command ability?
Well, it's not a blow your hair back thing, but it's because these things appear with other heroes as well. It's a stackable thing. So the command ability is that within 16 inches, you can choose a highborn unit to reroll all their failed hits that turn. Mm-hmm. Okay, so getting a pip of bonuses is always a beneficial thing. Having one pip of bonus can maybe not make or break it, but when you can stack it with 2, then suddenly you might be in a realm of automatic hitting.
Yeah. You get, and we'll go down and see that if you have a couple of heroes with this ability, you're not going to be able to use their multiple command abilities because you only get command abilities with your general. But there are some abilities that are inherent to some of these characters that are not command abilities, and you'll get synergies where you can get a lot of rerolls. And like you said, after a while, it just those misses getting rerolled, and if you get a +1 added in, it just adds up. And I keep saying this in all these videos, even more so than in previous editions. This edition is about bringing dice and to bear down on your enemy as much as possible. You don't need elite troops to destroy mega monsters and powerful characters. You could just get a mob of some of the crappiest units from previous editions, and the volume with some bonuses and some synergies can absolutely bring down some of the most powerful creatures and powerful heroes that are in these war scrolls. And that's what I love about them. Those, if you can combine these abilities, they make even the most mediocre units extremely effective. And I think the High Elves have that in droves.
Yeah, and we do see that with a little bit of foreshadowing. We see that in some magic spells that the dudes cast, where they get bonuses to hit or to wound. So that's how it comes to a stacking potential with this command ability.
Okay, let's move on to the High Elf Prince on a Griffin, and then I'd like to get your thoughts on how you might, specifically use these guys. And maybe we might actually even defer some of that in-depth opinion until we get to some of the units where I think we can go maybe look back on these heroes even, because it'll probably be much more effective once we see a couple of some of the abilities from some of those other units. So there's a difference obviously in these characters when they're mounted, when they have different war scroll, and I like that there's a different flavor. So take it away.
Well, this guy differs a little bit from the regular prince in that he doesn't carry a star lance; he's got a star wood lance, but it does the same thing. Oh no, sorry, it does a little bit more. It adds 1 to wound as well as to damage. Nice. I just noticed that now. So when you're charging, you're actually a little bit better off than the star lance.
Yeah,
I guess when you got the weight of a griffin behind you, it hurts a little bit more.
Yeah, that should work. And of course he's got more wounds. He's more mobile. That's certainly a big thing.
The most interesting thing about here, though, is that predatory leap ability, and we kind of got to imagine a battle situation where this is going to play out to your advantage, because it can be a bit of a surprise to somebody. So the way that this thing works is that when you pile in, you can move up to 6 inches, and you can leap over top of models to get to things in behind. And it doesn't have to move towards the closest enemy. So it can leap over guys intervening to get to within a ½ inch of its intended target, which might be that Packmaster behind your Skaven Rats that is giving him all the buffs, or it might be whatever other hero that you're trying to keep in a protective spot. That's what I see as the tactical genius behind that ability.
Yeah, there's a lot you can do with that. We see, again, I think that sometimes when you have very abbreviated rules, they're very streamlined, they open up for a lot of interpretation. And we've seen a lot of the sliding thing that a lot of people have been talking about. I don't buy into that. There's a blanket rule that is early in the scroll that when it comes to movement, and it says, there's only certain things you can do. You either move when you pile in, if you're within 3 inches, you can pile in, you can retreat, or you stay where you are. This breaks that completely. Just the verbiage alone is very obvious. He has the option to pile in elsewhere, and he's not restricted. He doesn't have that restriction of saying either you're piling in, running away, retreating, or you're staying where you are. He can move to other targets based on whether or not he can get that within a 6 inch range, and then within 2 inch range of his longest attacks. That's great. That is actually fantastic. He's not stuck making choices and critical decisions. He can be where he needs to be.
Yeah. So am I imagining from you that you might use this guy in a sort of a feint maneuver? Like you might charge into one target with the intention of really fighting a different target?
Or yes, absolutely. Or it might be a circumstance where the opportunity has changed based on how the combat is going. And now with either new units that have come in or with units that are depleted that you might want to try and break the back of that unit, or a character that maybe has come into range, or even assist another unit that might be taking a lot of hits. Depending on, there's so many different circumstances once you start getting multiple units and even several combats within a certain range of each other. He just has the flexibility to just be where you need him to be and take advantage of things that others will not. That predatory leap is a real nice ability.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a star in all these abilities. Now his command ability, when he's on a Griffin, is actually can be, depending on how you've designed your army, if you're designing it to be a charging, attacking sort of a force, this can really pay off in spades, because it's one of those few things that you don't pick a single unit. It applies to all of the units within a 16-inch radius of this guy that reroll their charge distances. So you're going to have a lot more reliable attack phase with this guy on the field and the properly suited group of followers.
Yeah, I like the High Elf Prince for obvious reasons on the Griffin more than just the standard High Elf Prince. But it's not just because of the wounds and the additional attacks. It's just I just like how the synergies and the flexibility. I'm sure there's a place for the regular High Elf Prince. If you had to choose between the two, it's a no-brainer. Obviously, guy in a Griffin versus guy in a horse.
Yeah.
But even if that was the case, if all things were equal, I'd go for this set of abilities.
Good.
All right. Let's go for the High Elf Prince on it. Now we can go ramp it up big time.
Yeah.
on a dragon.
From the medium boss to the big boss.
Yeah. Big Daddy. All right, take it away.
Well, I'm gonna skip over the dude on top, as you normally do with the guy and a dragon, and talk about the dragon first. These guys are absolutely lethal. I played a couple of my games with the dragon because I'm like a child. I want to play with the dragon. Why wouldn't I? So I did. But here's a couple of key things. First of all, the way that his fearsome jaw attack works, or rather his dragon fire works, is what I want to talk about first, is you just simply pick a visible unit and you roll a die. And that unit is either taking, depending on what you roll, a single mortal wound, die 3 mortal wounds, or as much as die 6 mortal wounds.
I know.
Unsavable. Take them off. Get rid of those models. And it's not a roll to hit. It's not a roll to wound. It's just, it happens. Lethal.
Very
lethal as heck.
I agree.
And then when you take into consideration that the dragon's attacks are, well, at full strength anyway, as we all know, the monsters kind of deplete themselves as they take wounds. But the jaw attacks just simply wound on a 2+, and they do D6 damage, Mitch. D6 damage.
Mm-hmm.
3 attacks out of that. And then even his weaker attack, supposedly weaker attack, has a Rend 1 with 2 damage.
Yeah. It's what a dragon should be. It should be ruthless and brutal.
It should be that imagery of the dragon just raking its face through a phalanx of guys and coming up with, a dozen of them hanging out of its jaw and, impaling them on its teeth. That's what's happening here every time this guy steps into combat.
And we'll talk about this when we get to the formations, because when you combine these guys on with multiple for the formation, it becomes even that much more crazy. It puts the K or the C, however you want to spell it, in the crazy. But one of the things, just to get to the guy, to the man on top, even though he may not be the main focus, again, his special ability with his Elven Warhorn is, there are some abilities that absolutely don't, on paper they may not look like they're that crazy, but you think about it in combination with some of the other abilities that each of these units have. This one, I think, can be a backbreaker. Within 10 inches, all units, all models from your army within 10 inches, so that's basically 20 inches across, can make 1 extra attack. And when you combine, and it's not just 1 extra attack, it's 1 extra attack with each of their melee weapons. And if you combine that with the rerolls, with modifiers to hit, and of course things like modifiers to wound, just take a look at this one model here. He's within 10 inches. He gets it too. All right, that's how I read it. That's how I've always read those types of rules. Look at how many different abilities he's got. They're all going to get an extra attack. That makes him even that much crazier.
I want to say to that, just to make a language distinction for those coming over from prior thinking. When we think of 1 extra attack in regular Warhammer, and I've got 2 attacks, well, now I have 3 attacks. That's not what this means. This means that you get to look at your attack profile. Let's take the Dragonlance, for example, that has 3 attacks and hits on 3s and wounds on 3s. An extra attack in the Age of Sigmar means you get a whole do-over, right? So that's way more significant than just I get to roll 1 extra die.
Yeah, couple that with rerolls, and now it just gets obscene. Yes, the answer is yes. I'll take 3.
And you can.
You can. And I just want to also stress, again, I've seen in one battle report a Bloodthirster go down to a unit of clan rats and go down hard, and there were clan rats left over. That 4-up save with a reroll, even if you put a Mystic Shield on him. Rends in this game, they stack up. Even just a -1 Rend can really put a hurt on this guy with volume of attacks from crud units. This guy's going to take wounds, and and what I love about monsters in this game is they're not going to deal with battle shock. They're going to die to their wounds, and they diminish over time in their effectiveness. It's a great mechanic. It's probably the best mechanic I like, or at least one of the top 2 or 3 of the mechanics in Age of Sigmar that I like. It makes these tremendously powerful monsters. It balances them out over the course of time if you can put some wounds on these guys. So as crazy as it looks, it's you got to look down the row after it's taken 3 or 4 or 5 wounds and use that as part of your tactics on what you're using for shooting or where you're targeting your war machines. This guy's going to definitely command your attention from the very first turn.
Yeah. Just real quickly to add to that, though, let's notice that this rider is carrying that enchanted shield again.
Yep.
So your dragon effectively has a reroll on the armor saves for his 14 wounds.
He's going to soak up a lot. Yes. All right, moving on down. Okay, now let's add some magic to it.
Let's.
High Elf Archmage on a dragon. Okay, so we've got the standard dragon fire. We have very similar powers and capabilities, movement and wounds. That is what we know of for the High Elf dragon. Now let's take a look at some of the other things. Now you have this Talisman of Power, and you can add 1 to the Unbinding. So you already have now a mobile platform, plenty of wounds, good defense. It's a little bit less on the save, but again, there's going to be a balance. It's not a big, heavily armored dude, and there's still 14 wounds here. But now you can go and maneuver around the board, get within line of sight if somebody's hiding behind a hill or behind a wall. Use that Unbinding, and now you get a +1 to that, plus your magic spells. And the magic spell that we see here, first of all, you know that you have Arcane Bolt, we have Mystic Shield, but the magic spell that is specific to the High Elf Mage, Archmage, on a dragon, is Drain Magic. And this, okay, so just reading this, it's a casting value of 4. All right? So how you really, so maybe we should just make it an auto.
Almost, yeah.
It's successfully cast. Yeah, sit right next to an arcane terrain piece, and you have nothing to worry about. If successfully cast, select a visible unit. That's a very key distinction. Visible unit within 18 inches. Any spells that are affecting that unit immediately cease. Furthermore, if the unit is a demon, it suffers die 3 mortal wounds as magic sustaining their forms is ripped away and dispatched by the vortex. So this is very much the anti-demon. We're going to see more of this, which is, it's quite effective against just about anybody. But that extra nice little die 3 wounds, that's key. You can strip away any bonuses that they have, any boons. But now then you got the mortal wounds if you just happen to be a demon. Don't be a demon next to the High Elves. It's still the bane of the High Elves. I mean, excuse me, the High Elves are still the bane of the demons.
Yeah, and it's a good nod to the flavor of the High Elves to really drive home the idea that they are anti-magic. So they have such control of magic that they're good at damping your enemy magic with that talisman in there as well. And that carries over onto other mages as well.
Oh,
which
yeah.
We're going to flip to next.
The mages are tough. Yeah, take away the High Elf Mage.
Yeah. So on this one, very simply, you still got the same kind of talisman to get you an extra 1 to your Unbinding rolls. But the innate spell that this guy has, the Shield of Safri, and I've used this, it's a little bit harder to cast, so it takes a 6 to get there. But from wherever he is, you cast an 18-inch radius, and any wound that is suffered, including mortal wounds, can be discounted if you roll a 6.
Yeah.
So it keeps guys up. It may seem small, but when we're talking about only 1 result out of a 6-sided die saves your life, when there's as much stuff dying and wounding as there is in Age of Sigmar, it actually does feel significant.
Yeah, you also don't have the restriction that you used to have with the point system, where you were limited to lesser because you're more elite troops, where you're more often than not heavily outnumbered with the High Elves. They've kind of been freed up in that regard, and this mechanic is that much more pronounced because if you have large units of, anything, I consider large units anything more than 20. So let's say you have a 30 or even 40 of something, which would be a lot. Those will add up because you're going to get 6s, and those mortal wounds are very common with war machines and magic spells. It's like you said, it gives you a little bit of that anti-magic flavor that you're going to see a lot of. You don't have the Banner of the Royal Dragon. I'm going to let you guys know who are all you High Elf players from Legacy players. So wipe the tear away. But just know that the effect of the anti-magicness of the High Elves is still there in stuff like this and others.
If I can reach back even a little bit further in time, the 7th edition books and even the 6th edition one, every High Elf mage had a +1 to dispel innately in there.
Really?
So that's a direct nod to this talisman ability here.
Sweet. All right, the Dragon Mage. All yours, man.
Yeah, so now that we talked about the anti-magic, this is the crazy, reckless mage out of the mage group. He's the one that he's the one that cut school and went and had done his own experiments behind the Tower of Safri, and that was reflected in the last incarnation of the High Elves as well. He's a guy that you might want to get into combat with, even.
Yeah.
I mean, you're on a dragon, and we talked about how terrifying the dragon is already, coupled with his dragon fire. But he also gets a bonus for charging, like you would expect out of a knight. So he whacks a little bit harder with his sun staff. And it is a die 3 damage on that sun staff with a rend that only takes a 3 to wound. So he's no slouch. But when we go to the very, very interesting Flames of the Phoenix spell that this guy wields, let's realize first off that it's one of the harder castings. It takes a 7, but you can shoot it at a unit, and it's going to suffer a mortal wound. And then it's going to suffer another one, and another one, and another one. And they build, in fact. Maybe I should do a better job of describing that, actually. So to start with, the unit takes a mortal wound. Like no dice rolls, it just does. Mm-hmm. And then if you roll a 3+, it takes 2 more. And then if you keep rolling and you roll, is it a 3+ then?
Then it goes to 4.
Then it takes 3 more, and so on until it runs its course.
Yeah, good dice rolling and you'll wipe out an entire unit.
Yeah, I did a terrible job of describing that, but
no, it worked out. It worked just as fine. I think you got the flavor of what that is. It's crazy. It's a lot of mortal wounds, and you just keep rolling. And if you can keep making those ever increasing and more difficult rolls, you'll just wipe out units. And if you fail it, fine. But still, they're mortal wounds. They're not just wounds; they're mortal. And unless you have the equivalent of a hard save versus mortal wounds, which very few units have. I mean, High Elves do have have it not in abundance, but they're there. You're even the greatest and craziest of characters and monsters are just going to start getting whittled down, and then they're going to start diminishing their power. It is a tremendously powerful ability, especially when you consider its range. All right, let's move on to High Elf Spearmen. Now we're starting to get into the rank and file type troops. And this is where, look, dragons are wonderful. These are characters we've been talking about. But the bread and butter of these armies really is in the units. It's what people have moved from. If they're legacy players, that's what they really loved about the older editions of Warhammer. If you're a newer player, you like the big centerpiece models. I do too. But there's great use for these types of units, where before they were kind of like must-haves or core type things that you had to include to qualify for to make your army. In this game, now it's a situation where it has to be attractive enough that you want to take your spearmen. Well, guess what? There is still an attractiveness to them. They have obviously decent move, which all High Elves do, of 6. There's you have the ability to, even though you only have 6 bravery, if you have a standard bearer, you're adding 2 to the bravery. This is going to be a theme throughout all of these troops. Standard bearers all add 2 to the bravery. You can pick the standard bearer, to be one of the last guys that dies, to keep that bravery in there. It's going to help you against battle shock. Your hornblower allows you to re-roll 1s when determining how far you run or charge. That's going to be key also with some other units that have some special abilities for running and charging as well. But that just means that these guys are much more effective to get where they need to go, to get into combat, to maneuver where you want to position them. The Elven Shield, same thing as before, but here now you get to not only re-roll saves, but you get to, essentially not re-rolling all saves. You're re-rolling 1s in combat, or you can re-roll 1s and 2s if you're being shot at. You have to declare that when the situation arises. So if in the shooting phase you decide to use that, you're using the 1 and 2. You're not going to be using the Elven Shield if you wind up in combat, later in that same turn, which I don't think is going to happen necessarily a lot, but once later in the game, it's going to start happening. But that's going to add up, and that's going to keep these guys much more alive. And you use that with some of the other synergies from other characters and other abilities, and it makes them, makes all of these units much sturdier. Militia, they get an extra attack if they have 20 or more models. Now, I just want to talk about tactics real quickly. First of all, I'm going to actually go to the spear phalanx first. Rerolls of 1, very key. All right. So, you're rolling to hit, it's a static number of 1, but you get +1 if they didn't move. So if they're defending an area, if they haven't moved or charged or whatever, you're when you go to hit, it's a +1. So now you're hitting on a 3+. Not a slouch, not bad at all, especially when you consider the potential for other things like rerolls and further modifiers to make them a 2+ to hit. But let's take a look at the extra attacks, specifically with the fact that they're spearmen. If you have a unit of more than 20, they get an extra attack. So they only start with that 1 attack. Doesn't look pretty impressive. Now they get 2 attacks for a larger unit of them. These guys can be in a row or in different type of geographical formations behind your frontline troops and get that extra reach in there for a whole other row of attacks. And if you put them, if you have enough of them, they're getting 2 attacks at that 2-inch range. That stuff always is going to add up. It's all about more dice on target. And the elves not just are getting more dice on target. They are efficient. They're precise.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think when I visualize this and when I've put it into practice, with the 2-inch range of the spear, you're effectively getting 3 ranks deep, if you can sort of imagine that abstract. Yeah. So when you got 20 or more in there and you're getting 2 attacks out of each of those, that stacks up pretty quickly.
And put them behind a heavily armored unit. One little row.
Yeah, good indeed. Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
All right, you got the archers.
Well, archers do what archers do, I suppose. They shoot you with pointed sticks. They do have the same kind of things as standard bearer and hornblower, and this reflects itself throughout most of the units in here. That they get that bravery bonus and running bonus. However, this one is it a mildly different? You reroll any 1s that you do when you're charging and running. Oh yeah, that is the same. Yeah, that's the same deal. Okay. Yeah,
the hornblower and standard bearer are pretty consistent. There are some differences, I think, but mostly they're across the board.
Yeah. Okay. So these guys have your typical rewards for larger units, which we see not just in the High Elves, but in a lot of the other armies that you've reviewed as well. So their reward for having more than 20 is to get +1 to hit rolls if they don't have an enemy nearby within 3 inches. So you're hitting on 3s now. And then you also have a once per battle storm of arrows where you can really unleash the pain. And so you can double your attacks out of those as long as you don't have an enemy right close in your face.
Yeah, there's I think it's once per battle, and I'm going to do a whole video on things like anti-summoning tactics and anti-shooting tactics, because a lot of people were up in arms when they first started reading these rules. They were saying shooting is overpowerful, summoning is overpowerful. I'm still not making a judgment yet on those things, but I'm finding more and more as we unlock these factions that there are things that mitigate them. They are crazy when you look at them just in terms of their best possible scenario. But that no enemy models within 3 inches, you can neuter these units. They're, if you can get somebody in range. And there's the deep striking type ability. You have to start within 9 inches, but you still get to charge. There's ambushers, there's summoning. There's a lot of mechanics to get models, fast moving units. There's a lot of mechanics to get models in the face of units like this. If you don't do it, they're gonna batter you with those arrows. But you can mitigate some of those crazy abilities, and then these guys are nothing in combat. They're just gonna fall in droves. They're not meant to be hand to hand.
Yeah, that 6+ save is not going to keep them up for long, even if you got your High Elf Mage nearby casting the Shield of Safri to let you cast it off on another 6 if you happen to roll it. You're going down pretty easy, as you'd expect out of skirt wearing archers.
All right, so we've got the Silver Helms. Okay, the first of our Cav. I think Cav is definitely taken a big boost in this game from previous editions. I don't know if the Silver Helms necessarily have gotten much better than they were before. They were, stalwart, they're very, very strong, but they were in the core range. I like that they have a nice 12-inch move. I've been seeing a lot of the Cav units at 10. Obviously, 2 wounds apiece is going to make them pretty burly. They have, you know, the 2 attacks from the even though it's only a 5 up to wound versus 4 for the rider, it was nice to get those extra 2 attacks. For the horses, those 2 attacks, man. We all know that the real unsung heroes of Cav are the horses. They always wind up being the ones that actually do the damage. But let's take a look at some of these other things. They've got a 4-up save. So now remember, they're 2 wounds apiece. 4-up save. You've got the Elven Shield, so you're re-rolling 1s. If you want to do it in shooting, you can re-roll 1s and 2s. On a charge, they're adding 1 to their wound and damage rolls. So that's key. They're now going to be at a 3-up for damaging, and they're going to do 2 wounds instead of 1. And they add 1 to all of their hits if there's more than 10 of them. So the sweet spot really is just to go, at least 10, 12, or whatever, however many you can fit. And I'm not even going to talk about the potential for comp that puts caps on things. But let's just say this. You want to have at least 12, in my opinion, so you can have a little bit of a buffer to lose if you're going to lose a few of these guys, and then you'll still be able to get some of those extra bonuses. They're just a solid all-around, Cav unit. They don't really have any tremendous flavor, but they're going to get the job done, and they're going to do damage, and they're going to absorb damage.
Yeah, so it reflects some of the same things that the other core guys do. So again, keeps the flavor and it keeps it cohesive sounding.
All right.
You're going to get excited. If you were excited about 12-inch move on your horses, check these guys out. 14 inches Illyrian Reavers, really exemplifying the fast cav. Also really notable is their cavalry bows shoot twice. Hitting on a 4 and wounding on a 4. That's not spectacular, but you're doubling your shots, so it's certainly going to pay off. But here's the other super tricky thing, and it kind of goes back akin to what we were talking about with the Griffin, is their Illyrian purebreds can not only move 14 inches in their move phase, but then can roll 2 dice and move either before or after shooting. So the way that I've employed this when I'm playing is I get in there, I take my 2 shots, and then I jump back. Right? So I'm not in threat of being charged now that I've closed the gap. So it's a stick and move tactic that I've really learned to enjoy. And that's really important because the other ability, the swift volley, is in fact you make 3 attacks with those bows if you don't have an enemy nearby. That is awesome and devastating.
Yeah, and they're probably going to be able to put themselves in a position where they're not right next to the enemy. You're going to have a hard time catching these guys, just like you used to in the previous edition. Yeah, they were very very hard to nail down. They still are, and just really fast.
Oh yeah,
really fast.
Yeah, good stick and move tactics, like you'd expect out of fast cav.
All right, Dragon Princes. Okay, you're going to have similar stats to what we saw with the Silver Helms. But let's take a look at some of the differences here. The first one, is you're gonna have the lance charge, very similar. Same thing with the Hornblower and the Standard Bearer. But let's take a look at that Drake shield. It looks like it's similar in terms of the enchanted shield. They really only have the difference here being that they have their arrogant pride. Unit doesn't need to take battle shock tests if any highborn models from your army have fled this turn. Now, I think just about everything is considered highborn. So if you've taken any damage if you've lost any models, if you've taken casualties from a battle shock test, they don't need to take a battle shock test. Now, yeah, they've got decent to hit, decent wound. I'm gonna say this right off the bat. They're nice for thematically. I don't think that there's anything here that really is leaping out and grabbing me that they're so they feel a little bit fluffier with their abilities, but they don't have anything that dramatically puts them ahead of the Silver Helms, with one exception, and that is they start out with base 2 attacks on their lance sword. So that does help offensively. But and certainly I keep saying, attacks, you need to get more attacks, better to hit, obviously. But I think it's going to be more of a theme scenario. If you like Dragon Princes before and you have them in your army, you should know that they still can do the job. but they're not tremendously different, in my opinion, from the Silver Helms.
I agree with you, and I'd add just one other comment about that arrogant pride ability, and that is it's sort of a backhanded ability, right? Like it's if you're losing elsewhere, then you won't lose here. It's sort of how it works out, right?
Yeah.
Like as you watch your other units around you crumble and flee, these guys will hold the line. So I guess thanks, but it softens the blow from losing elsewhere.
Still tough, still a good choice, and an ability that I'm sure will come into play. It'll certainly come into play. Take that battle shock on those guys last.
Yeah.
All right. Tyrannok chariots. Now we get to the chariots. Yours, all yours.
All right. Well, it's got a bevy of attacks, and you kind of got to look at what used to be a combined unit is now sort of separated in all of its different attacks. The thing that I notice here is that it doesn't. I was hoping that chariots would have some kind of semblance of carryover of impact hits into this Age of Sigmar game, but it doesn't. Like it doesn't reflect that anymore.
Some of them do.
So you just kind of slide in there. You're faster. You're mildly beefier than 2 horses, or 2 dragon princes, or 2 silver helms, or whatever it is. But you're effectively the same combat ability as 2 silver helms. Mm. Right? Do you see anything else deeper there?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that they have, it's nice. They're going to be a little more effective. I think they're going to do a little more damage. There's more attacks. And you're going to have more. You're going to have more horse attacks. You're going to have. I think it's going to be more effective than double the than 2 equivalent silver helms. Just because again, you're looking at an extra wound, and then some of the abilities to reroll. Is pretty nice. It's nothing that again that leaps out and grabs me, for just in terms of a chariot advance. I will say this: I've seen in a number of different of these war scrolls from other armies, and that sometimes when you finish the charge, when you finished it, and units within like an inch or something like that will have to take additional hits. In some cases, they're mortal wounds. That kind of mimics some of the impact hits. I think what they're describing here is that the Tyrannok chariots, I think, are more swift and less destructive in that impact, as opposed to like a beastman chariot hit or one of monstrous cavalry, for instance, with some of their charges, or even the ogres. You see a lot more of those types of things in those armies.
Yeah, it's one of those things though that if I see it, I don't know if I'm taking it in an army, a chariot. Not that I did very much in the past, but there's nothing here that's making me think that I need to add that instead of a couple of silver helms.
Not this chariot.
No.
Not this chariot. And one of the things that has been pointed out, I haven't played with a lot of chariots yet, is that sometimes when you get too many chariots, if you do a big unit of them, it's hard for them to all get into that combat range. They kind of get jammed up. So, this is one that I'd really have a suspicious eye. If you really have a themed army, you might want to consider it. But, I think there's better choices to take.
Okay.
All right, High Elf repeater bolt thrower. I think this is a little bit hard to understand at first read. It's just I'm getting a little.
Yeah, I think I know what you're going to say. So take it away.
I'm getting a little feedback on. I don't know if it's my mic or yours. Okay, so the way this thing works is you get a choice. Okay, the first thing is that you have, based on how many of your crew you have X number of shots. So it must be me. It must be my mic, because I'm definitely hearing what I haven't heard before. A little bit of a hum. You hearing that?
No, I'm not hearing any feedback from you.
Is your speaker up?
Yep. I'll see what I can do to adjust this. Hang on.
Sure, no problem. Okay, so let's say you have 2 crew, and the 2 crew are going to dictate the amount of shots that you can take, depending on which type of shooting you want to do. So just like in the previous edition, you have a bolt that's going to do more high damage. It's going to be a singular shot, but then you have the repeating bolts. They're going to do less damage, but you have more volume. I think I'd always choose personally the more shots. It's harder to hit. It's one worse in terms of hitting. It's not as good in terms of rending. But, you know, I can't tell you how many times I have these great abilities and you have one try at it and you don't roll the hit. And then it's just, that sucks. I'd rather have more dice and take my chances. All right. But if you look at the chart in the second chart, based on how many crew models you have, you basically get two, you know, it's double. So if you lose a crew member, it goes back down to, you know, 1 shot for the Thilmar bolt and 6 for the repeating bolts. So the key is, if you're facing down in a bolt thrower, you want to try and kill off at least one of these crew members. All right, that's a big deal. That's a way to try and kind of mitigate some of their ability. 36 inches, great range, great range. And certainly, you know, you cannot discount the fact that they're going to throw lots of bolts. You're going to have lots of rending saves to make, and they're going to start dropping damage. These things don't usually drop, even in previous editions, giant monsters or, you know, wipe out, you know, entire units. But they typically can put a real hurt on a unit, diminish them. You know, they could wipe out some small characters, or, you know, well, if they're by themselves, or you know, do some wounding, or even be counter battery for other war machines. So they definitely have a use on the table. But, you know, there's an Achilles heel. You just got to know what the mechanic is, and you've got to try and get there.
I think the one thing that I'd add to that is that these things can move and shoot now.
Yeah.
So as long as you got a crew nearby, you can drag this thing 6 inches and blast it off as well.
And that's also big with the line of sight issues. You know, you might have that one angle. All right, Great Eagles, it's yours.
Great Eagles. I don't know how these things are still alive in the Warhammer world after all the chaffing that they took in the last edition. How are they not extinct?
Well, you know, I think that you know, Sigmar must have had a little Noah's Ark, you know, genetic samples or whatever. Or in some cases, these are throwbacks to playing, you know, the old units. Some of these things do carry over to the current, you know, millennia. But yeah, I agree. I'd like to see if there's Great Eagles on any of these planes of existence.
Yeah, I think they still do. They seem a little bit more offensive here, or they're trying to tip them that way instead of just a blocker, because you get a reward for charging by having 6 attacks instead of 4. That's pretty good out of one model, right? To have a half dozen dice rolls out of one single model.
Amen.
It's really good. But I think, again, where these guys shine is that you can dodge out of combat. So this is the soar away ability that after a combat, and I assume this is after both sides have fought, because the way that it reads is it's the end of combat phase. If you got any enemy nearby, you can just roll 3 dice and back yourself off. So that you don't have to waste your next move to retreat if you don't like what you're facing there. Or alternately, if you want to reload for another charge and get those 6 attacks instead of 4 again.
And
so I like how that works.
They're beefy with 4 wounds. They're gonna then that 16-inch move is just crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. A different mechanic to use them as chaff, basically.
Yeah, I don't think that they're chaff now. I think they're mobile strikers, and that's kind of good. I like the idea that they incorporate that in a few different units here in this elf army.
All right. Now we're going to bypass the Shadow King. We're probably going to have to save this for another hangout. Let's talk about Shadow Warriors. Okay. Now they are a little bit at a disadvantage because one of their special abilities is being next to a special character, Alathanar. But let's just take a look at what they are without that. First of all, you know, we're talking about, you know, the ability to set up and then make a move. It's a scout move from previous editions. After you've finished setting up, you can move these guys 12 inches. You can't be within 3 inches of an enemy model, but you can get these guys to within range. First of all, if you're shooting, which is 18 inches, not bad. Healthy 3 up, 4 up on hit wound. They're not slouches in combat when they get in there. 2 attacks each, not bad at all. I'd love to take a unit of these guys. Even maybe they're not even a huge unit, but get them up, maybe even 2 units, put them on each of the flanks, get them in there and start sniping out, you know, the behind enemy line characters. Maybe try to drop some, you know, some wounds on some monsters if you can. You know, they don't have any rend, but you're going to get some good bow shots. I'd probably go and character snipe and maybe try to knock out some high value targets. The strike unseen also. If all the models in this unit are in cover and are more than 6 inches away from enemy units, you can reroll fail to hit rolls. That's great. You're, again, precise. You put them on a hill, and again, they're in cover. If all you have to do is be on a terrain piece, you're considered to be in cover. All right, you have to suspend a little disbelief. It doesn't have to be behind a rock, the little rocky pieces on the hill. It just has to be on the terrain piece. As long as you're fully on that, it's different than in previous editions the way it's worded. And when you're in cover, you're going to get another bonus. By the way, you're not just going to get that bonus where you can reroll those failed to hit rolls when you're shooting. You're also going to be, and it's not just shooting, it says just failed to hit roll. So it's going to be in combat as well. But apparently it's only if you're 6 inches away. So it really is a mechanic for shooting. But let's also realize that when you're on a fully terrain piece in the game, you also are getting cover, which means that their 5-ups are going to become 4-up saves. And that's really nice. So they've got some really interesting and really cool mechanics apart from their synergy with the special character that make them effective. They're going to do what they're meant to do, and that is scout up and harry your opponent and try to take out or whittle down some high value targets.
Yeah, I think they're a useful thing. And of course, there's going to be terrain types that you don't want to stand in out there, but that shouldn't hinder you too much. I think your Shadow Warriors will find a way to be somewhere safe and effective.
Now, we're not going to look at Alariel, but one of the things that I don't know if I remember correctly, I don't think that they were, you could do this in the previous edition where you could just take the handmaidens on their own. You had to take them with Alariel. Am I right with that?
No, you could have a handmaiden on her own.
All right.
She could even be your battle standard bearer. The thing that you're hearkening back to is that only the handmaiden could carry the Everqueen's banner.
Ah, okay, there you go.
So that's the thing that sort of ties her to Alariel. But let's talk about, maybe we'll talk about the handmaiden and the sisters at the same time.
Yeah.
Because effectively the handmaiden is just really a champion for them.
Mm-hmm.
So they share the same ability that they have Arrows of Isha, which get an extra 1 to a wound against a particular faction, and this is any of the Chaos faction. So we saw a little bit of demon hate earlier with one of the magic spells, right? So here it repeats itself again, that the High Elves are sort of the anathema to Chaos. So that's a cool bonus. Now, also, both of them, both the Handmaiden and the Sisters, have this Quicksilver shot, which means that as long as they don't move, they get 2 shooting phases.
Mm-hmm.
Effectively, they get to shoot twice.
Yeah.
So when they hit on 3 and wound on 3, that's pretty healthy.
Yeah.
When they hit on 3 and wound on 2 against Chaos guys, that's super healthy.
Yeah, it kind of makes it's kind of, again, it's a nod and wink to the fact they had all those extra, they were like flaming magical in the previous edition. They're extra special wounding against Chaos, which tend to be in the previous edition probably had some abilities that they could mitigate.
Now, the Handmaiden also has not the enchanted shield, but effectively the same ability that she can reroll her armor saves.
Mm-hmm.
Being an elf hero. And then the other thing that's of a special note with the Sisters, which I think is awesome, is their ability of Loose Until the Last, where in a turn, if an enemy ends its charge within a half inch of this unit, then the Sisters just blast them at point blank range and they shoot them again.
Yeah.
So think about this. You could, on your turn, stay still, shoot twice against the dirty Chaos guys, hitting on 3s and wounding on 2s. And then when those remaining Chaos guys have just had enough of you and decide to charge in, well, you give it to them a 3rd time. How you like me now?
Yeah, they're just as brutal, if not, I mean, they're tremendously brutal, but they were scary in the previous edition. They are very scary in this edition. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then one small addition that if you actually do pair them up with a Handmaiden, then you're going to reroll your ones to hit.
Oh, that's not all. There's more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. They're dangerous. I'm glad I bought some.
The Anointed of Assyrian. I actually bought bits just so I could have them be like casualties with some of my conversions. So I've just got a couple of like body parts and heads and, upper bodies and lower bodies. I did that with a lot of my conversions just to be like a little thumb to my opponent just to see that, to get that one unit filler that no longer is valid in this game with those guys. All right, so the Anointed of Assyrian. So the Anointed of Assyrian is a single character, and he's got some use. I would definitely say you can consider taking him. We're talking about one character with 5 wounds, pretty standard. He's got 4 attacks, which is not bad. 3 up with a rend. So his main things are this Witness to Destiny and Blessing of Assyrian. So whenever he suffers a wound or mortal wound, he on a 4 or more, it's ignored. That's just basically like having a ward save from the old edition. And he's got a really nice ability, which is that he counts as a wizard in terms of being able to do and 1 unbinding. So you bring this guy up. He doesn't seem to have any other synergies with other units that I can see, other than perhaps if he's within proximity to some units. If they need a hero character within certain range, they get some bonuses. But his ability is to survive, first of all, even against mortal wounding type things. But he'll give you that extra ability to try and stop magic spells. So you want to get him up into the action within 18 inches, and then you don't have to waste another unbinding. You've got a free unbinding. So not bad, worth taking if you're dealing with a very magic heavy opposition, but very situational, I think.
I think that has more uses than you first think, because you want your high elf mages hiding, right? They're your protective guys, so you want them way back and deep. This guy's actually your only opportunity, probably in most cases, with the exception of your Archmage on a dragon, if you're flying him around, to actually stick his nose into the fray and be able to unbind those spells that your opponent's doing early in the game.
Yeah, I'd run him up. I definitely use that 6 move with a run. All right, Phoenix Guard for you.
Okay, well, Phoenix Guard at first value have the same kind of command that our other regular plebe high elves have. But they do carry over that Witness to Destiny, which is large, because you have a 4+ save to start with, which is fairly significant for foot troops. But then you effectively, as you said, had their equivalent of a 4+ ward save now. They do carry halberds, so they got that 2-inch range reach, much like the spears do, with 2 attacks, hitting on 3s and wounding on 3s. And we're going to see this a little bit later with the other elite infantry. They're all very good at laying out the pain. There's no slouches at that.
So yeah, you're going to break your units against the Phoenix Guard like you did in previous editions. They're just going to stand in there.
And equally, they add a couple of extra things just to rub you in it. As you're having a hard time killing these Phoenix Guard because there's double stacking save, they have this aura of dread that if the Phoenix Guard's enemy fails Battle Shock nearby, then they're going to have 1 extra model go away.
Yeah, I've noticed that they get the ability that the Harpies got with the Dark Elves. But these guys are going to be closer to combat. The Harpies have it from long range. But you're gonna have your Phoenix Guard in the middle of the fray. They're just going to be there, a nice solid block. However many you have, and they're just going to absorb stuff. So clearly, if you're going to be dishing it out, it's nice to know that if you start removing casualties due to battle shock, you're going to be able to pile on. They're going to be doing more.
Yeah. And now, if you want to be even more resilient than that, then have your Anointed hang out nearby, because then you don't have to ever do battle shock tests with your Phoenix Guard.
Yeah, because why would the Phoenix Guard be running? If I was a Phoenix Guard, I wouldn't be going anywhere.
No. No, indeed.
Flame Spire Phoenix. Okay, we talked a little bit about this before we actually started the hangout. Between the two Phoenix, is it Phoenixes or Phoenixi?
I think the correct bastardized English might be Phoenices.
Oh no, I'm not going there. Forget it. All right, so the Flame Spire, I think, is the most improved and can be argued to probably be even better than the Frost. They're both awesome. They're both epic. I mean, they're just incredible. And keep your eye out for the potential for a Frost Fire Phoenix coming somewhere down the road, because we already seen a picture of it in the very first scenario book. So just like before, they dish some serious damage. You know, as you're talking about 6 flaming talons at the highest level wounds before it's gotten hurt. Which is nothing to laugh at. 4 up to hit, pretty good. 3 up to wound, a -1 rend and a 2 damage. That's a lot of attacks and the potential to do some serious damage. The Great Phoenix Halberd, this is, I guess, the guy that's on top, gets 4 attacks. 3 up, -1, 1, also phenomenal. Let's talk first now about some of the special abilities, because that's where this guy really gets crazy. All right, we're talking about the Wake of Fire. Okay, and actually, let me first start with the Phoenix Reborn. If this model is slain, if it dies, you roll a die. On a 4 up, it comes back with all its wounds, just like all Phoenix should, rising up from their ashes.
That is nuts.
And you get to, I mean, this all in all of its 12 wound glory, 9 inches from the enemy, so you can get them right back in the action. That 4 up is amazing. All right, but let's talk about before you kill it, if you manage to kill it, and before it might come back for a second time, the Wake of Fire. All right, first of all, you pick an enemy unit and that it flew over. Now, with the amount of move it has, 16, you're going to be able to fly over a lot of units, but you get to pick the one you want, and then you consult this chart. It starts off at die 6, mortal wounds. That's great. It's just dishing out such pain. And yes, that diminishes over time to die 3 and then only to 1. But still, while this baby is alive, you don't even have to get into combat. If you get him into combat initially, you just retreat. And with that 16-inch move, you pass over units easily. In most cases, you won't have a problem, unless it's a really cluttered battlefield. And you're just retreating him away from combat or around the battlefield, such that you stay outside of 3 inches from any enemies, and you're just racking up more and more mortal wounds. So now let's go even further. Attuned to magic. If he's 12 inches from any successful cast spell, all right, you roll a die. On a 2 or more, they add 1 to their saving throw. It's a 5 up, which is okay. Now it goes to a 4 up. All right. And then the Witness to Destiny, whenever it's ridden by an anointed of Assyrian. So you have that option to do that. Why wouldn't you? All right. And if it suffers a mortal wound on a 4 or more, it's got that old school ward save of ignoring a mortal wound. The Flamespire Phoenix is just incredible. You got to have a Phoenix. I think I'd put this down before I put down a dragon.
I think I would as well. This is the most terrifying thing for an enemy to face, by far. It's more resilient than its little stat bob in the corner shows you, because you're going to have other wizards. The key thing that I want to point out about the Attuned to Magic is it's not about enemies casting spells nearby. It's anybody casting spells. Mm-hmm. So of course I'm going to have a wizard nearby that casts a spell to give my Phoenix a little bit of a buff. And then now off you can go with your 4+ save now instead of 5. Then if you happen to fail that 4+ save, well, while your anointed is riding it, you're just going to cast that off on a 4 anyway. So get to work, bad guys, in trying to work through my 12 wounds, and then go cry in the corner after I have a 50% chance of just popping back up after I'm finished, after you finally finish me off.
Oh, God. It's nice to know that the high elves still have the batshit crazy stuff.
That's right. Bonkers.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about his brother.
The frosty cousin?
Yeah, the frosty cousin. There you go.
Okay. Well, actually, the script flips a little bit on this one, because that bag of stats is still the same. You can put an anointed on here, and you still get the Attuned to Magic. So those things are all the same. You can get that Witness to Destiny. You can have that bonus to your armor save by casting magic nearby. The difference, of course, what it has is the Blizzard aura. So what happens here is this is one of the few things that we've come across so far that are a debuff for your opponent. And it makes it harder for your opponents to wound anything that they attack if they're within a certain range of this guy. And that range starts out at 9 inches. So 9 inches emanating from this Frostheart Phoenix. You get him stuck in combat, and then suddenly you're a little bit more comfortable with maybe sending in your Phalanx of Spearmen right next to him to fight those gore beasts or whatever it is that you might be fighting. Because not just the Phoenix is harder to wound, but your friends nearby within that Frost aura are harder to wound. So it's not as scary, frightening to your enemy to deal with, but it might balance out nearly as much in the benefits that you get to the rest of your army fighting in concert with him.
Yeah. I want to try and move through some of these a little bit faster just because we're getting closer to the our end time. All right, Loremaster of Hoeth. Okay, so your standard 5 wounds, got a little, can do a little bit in. He's got 2 attacks, so it's still the ability to dish out a little bit of hurt with a 3-up, 3-up. Deflecting shots. Okay, I love this. I just love the look of this. I mean, you get this Loremaster, put them in with some Sword Masters or next to some Sword Masters. They just have this awesome look. They tended to be frowned upon in comparison to other elite units from the previous edition. But I've always loved the look of Sword Masters and the Loremaster no less. Reroll failed save rolls in the shooting phase. Awesome. You're starting off with a 4-up. He's a wizard. So he can unbind, he can cast a spell. His spell is the Hand of Glory. In this edition, it's a 5 cast, not so bad. A unit within 18 inches, you can reroll fail to hit and wound rolls. That's just awesome. That's just phenomenal.
I want to point out something really subtle about that, Mitch.
Yep.
And that is that it's a single model.
Yeah.
Not a unit.
Well,
but if that single model is either your Flamespire Phoenix or your Dragon Riding Prince, that's nut bars.
Yeah. I meant that you put, he just looks cool next to the Sword Masters because they all have swords.
Yeah, he does.
All right, let's go to the High Elf Sword Masters. Take it away.
Yeah, well, they share a couple things with our friend there, in that they deflect shots, so they're a little harder to shoot down. So they reroll their 4+ save against shooting, which is pretty huge, really. But their other business is their Blur of Blades. Any rolls of 1 that you do when you're attacking with the Sword Masters can get rerolled. So when you already hit on a 3 and you have 2 attacks, that's pretty reliable. You can almost guarantee that. And when you turn it out the other end with wounding on 3s and rending, this is a vicious unit.
Yeah.
Elite infantry is still as scary as elite infantry used to be.
Yeah, and a very respectable 4-up save. Very respectable. All right, we're going to move past Core Hill and go to the White Lions of I don't know if I'm pronouncing, is it Crace?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, hard K sound.
All right, cool. White Lions, love the look of these. Hated to see them on the battlefield. They always seem to have the banner of the World Dragon with them. Let's see what we've got. They got 2 attacks, 3-up, 3-up, just like the Sword Masters. What's their extra special sauce? They can reroll rolls of 1 in the shooting phase. Okay, so they have that Lion Cloak. That's okay. It's nice. They got a 4-up save. Unflinching Courage. They each you roll a 4-up. You roll on 4 or more, then the model's courage stirs up within him, and he returns to the battle. He does not flee. So a little bit of a battle shock defense, less that you're going to lose if you take some casualties with these guys. And then the captain can reroll fail to hits of 1 if he's within 8 inches of Core Hill. That's just if there's a special character. I got to say this. I think the stock for the White Lions just went down a little bit because they were so brutal before. They're definitely still awesome, and they look phenomenal on the table. But, I just kind of think that I would probably take those Sword Masters over the White Lions, where I never would have done that before.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that.
Yeah. All right, you got the white lion chariot. Now let's see if we get a little better flavor on the chariot.
Well, it's a bit better than the Tyrannok chariot, of course, because it's got lions pulling it that hit and wound a little bit easier, and you have white lions on the back that are also hitting and wounding a little bit easier. But I still miss the fact that it doesn't really rip into you as much as I'd like a chariot to. It does give you a reward of making 8 attacks with the lions when you charge. So I guess that maybe gives a little bit of a nod to the bonus of charging with a chariot.
That's a lot.
It is a lot, yeah. But I think when you get stuck in there, in the end, I don't know if it's super great.
Well, 6 wounds, 4 up save. Not bad. Not bad. It's a chariot. It's a tough chariot with lots of attacks.
Yeah. Well, maybe when I think about it again, if you're charging and you get 12 attacks out of one model, I suppose that is kind of efficient.
And let's also think about the synergies with some of the other enhancements that might allow for rerolls or +1 to hit or wound or both. I mean, 9 move, it's a little bit faster than most chariots. Well, not most. Some chariots are 10 inches. Most of the chariots I'm seeing are like 8 inches. And of course it's a chariot being pulled by a bunch of lions. I mean, come on. I was about to say tigers. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Bunch of lions. It's got the cool factor as well. Mm-hmm. It makes me want to take like 3 of them. All right, the sea helm, Lothran sea helm. Okay, these this is a single model. All right, it's got let's see. This is the first time I'm actually looking at it. I have to be honest with you.
Well, let me read you something here, and let's get there's something I want to debate with you just a little bit.
You got it.
So. I'll first say that he's your typical hero level guy. He's got that enchanted shield again, so he rerolls his 5+ armor save. Not such a big deal. But here's the thing. He's carrying the Sea Dragon pennant, and the way that it reads is that it's a totem, and you can add 1 to wound rolls for any highborn units within 8 inches of him when they attack. And you can add 1 to wound rolls for any Sea Guard or Sky Cutters within 16. So when I first read that, I thought to myself, oh, okay, well, so any high elf gets it if they're real close, but Sea Guard and Sky Cutters can range out a little bit further and get the bonus. Mm-hmm. But the way that I read it now is it says you get the bonus to highborn within 8 inches, and you can add 1 to the wound rolls for the other units within 16. So does that mean that not only do they range out further, but they get +2?
Yes, the way I'm reading it is yes, and the reason why is because there was no hard stop. It's one sentence with an and. I'm not a lawyer, all right. I never profess to be. I know I argue my points, and I usually try to defend them very in a very strong way. And I apologize if sometimes a little bit too strongly. But when people prove me wrong, I buckle real quick and own up to it. This thing, I think you're seeing it right in the way you're reading it right now. I do agree. I think it's stacked, which is nuts.
That's a big boon for those units then, isn't it?
Oh yeah, but that's great because look, unless you're playing a theme army, not a lot of people were taking we're taking those units, the Sea Guard. And then the Sky Cutter too. I mean, this is a way to basically say these units are now a little bit better. Take this guy, and now you've got this big enhancement. And he could be your general, because if you take him as your general, you've got that stand fast ability.
Yeah, which is re-rolling all your stuff on one unit that you choose. Right?
Yeah,
re-rolling hits, wounds, and saves.
That's crazy. That's awesome. You got big solid block of. Think about it. Think about this. Let's say it's a solid block of spearmen. A large block of spearmen with like 2 attacks or 3 attacks. Now you're getting rerolls to hit, wound, and your saves. I mean, we're talking just spearmen here, okay? They're highborn. We're talking about the elite troops. There's a lot of nice stuff with that ability. I love that ability, and I only looked at it really briefly before, and I guess I just didn't absorb it until you went through it. All right, one of my favorite looking models in the High Elves, but very few people took it because it was not very effective in previous editions. The Sky Cutter. So let's hear what your thoughts are on the Sky Cutter.
Well, I myself love the Sky Cutter, and I'll tip my hat that I have also 50 Sea Guard and 2 Sky Cutters.
Nice.
That I have painted. So I'm going to use the heck out of this sea helm. I'm going to be to take advantage of that.
Awesome.
So again, this is a flying chariot. It is much beefier than the other two chariots, even the White Lion chariot, because it's got 8 wounds here.
Yep.
And it moves 16, so it's going to be wherever you need it to be. You get a couple less attacks, I guess, when you look at it overall.
Well, the difference
but they're still just as dangerous. I mean, that swift feather rock hitting on 3s and wounding on 4s that rend, that's decent.
Yeah, it's awesome. You can only take one. It's a single model, so you're not taking a unit of these where you can with other chariots. But for what you get for that one model, you're getting a lot. I think you're getting a lot.
Yeah. Now you got your boss on the back of it in this instance, so you have that enchanted shield, re-rolling your saves, which become a 4+ against shooting, by the way. And then you extend that Sea Drake Pennant ability, which would include this Sky Cutter, right?
Yep.
So they're going to add 1 to all their, or add 2 rather to all their wounds.
Yeah, 2 up. 2 up.
Yeah.
2 up to hit.
So 2 up to wound is what it looks like here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's pretty good when you consider all those attacks. And then let's add, well, on top of that, the ability to maybe get 1 extra attack for all your in your profile for one of the other characters we saw, one of the command abilities. I forget what that was from. And now you're really ratcheting it up the cray cray. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think the Sea Helm is a big winner here.
Yeah.
In this whole war scroll.
Yeah, if I go and dive into High Elves at some point, I'm definitely going the nautical route.
Yeah, dude, embrace it.
I'm doing it. I'm gobbling up little armies, man. I'm gobbling up little armies. All right, the Lothran Sea Guard. Okay, so we're talking about bow and spear. They're armed with spears and bows. They can carry elven shields. I mean, they've got versatility, and they've got, of course, style. So they start out with that 4 up, but then let's also remember that they're getting the extra 2. So now they're 2 up, 2 up. They're no joke when it comes to the synergies here. This is really good synergies. I'm not seeing as much synergies in this army as I'm seeing in other armies. Like, for instance, the Dark Elves had a lot of different types of synergies. Most of what I'm seeing in terms of this army really is with the Sea Guard. The Lothran really have a lot of stuff that really work well together, and you can use some of the generic heroes to add on to that. So yeah, that's going to be something I'm going to have to look at. And if you're a High Elf player and you've got some of these, you're going to be really happy. So then we have the Lothran Sky Cutter. This is a unit, any number of models. That's interesting. Didn't we just have this?
Well, the difference was the one we were looking at a second ago was the hero riding the Sky Cutter.
Right.
And this is a Sky Cutter without. So here's the options you can have here is you can mount a mini bolt thrower on top of this thing.
That's right.
Notice that?
Yes. Well, just like in the previous edition, I remember that bolt thrower on top of a flying chariot. I love it.
Yeah, so you got a shorter range, but you still do the same kind of damage spread as the regular bolt thrower that we looked at earlier. It does die 3. Well, I guess it's a less rend. It's only -1 rend instead of 2 like the regular one.
Yeah.
But if you do want to charge into combat, you got some attacks out of your Swift Feather Rock. 2 other really cool things here is that you can shoot on the run with this. So you can have a bolt thrower that runs and shoots.
Nice. So die 6 plus added on to the 16 for movement. These guys should just sit behind your enemy lines, wait until you want to get them into combat, and just shoot. Just shoot 16 inches over the heads of your frontline units, and then come in when they need.
Well, think about this: if a guy comes to chase you down and gets within just a few inches of you, because you can fly, you can leap over top of him and end up with a run another 15 inches behind him potentially. Shooting him in the back. So another more of the stick and move tactics that I'm really attracted to. Yeah. Out of the way that this whole war scroll looks.
Yeah. Well, in general, Age of Sigmar. Look at retreat. There's so much you can do with retreat. Some armies, obviously, and some war scrolls better than others. But retreat, you cannot ignore retreat. Okay, let's take a look real quickly in the time that we have left on the formations. So you can take glittering. Actually, no, I'm going to give you the choice because everybody's going to want to hear about the Dragon Host, I'm sure. So which one would you like to talk about first?
Well, you can talk about the Glittering Host if you like.
All right, there we go. This is the Glittering Host is okay. It's not bad. All right. If you look, you're going to take a prince, 2 units of archers, 2 units of spearmen, and 1 unit of silver helms. This is basically like taking a bunch of core from previous edition. But by doing that, and most people who are legacy high elf players are going to have these units because they were required. Now they're not, but the fact that you have them, would be nice if you want to play a little bit of a different flavor army selection. And in doing so, you get some extra benefits. First one is you can roll 2 dice and take the worst one. I mean, discard the worst one whenever you're taking battle shock tests when you're within 16 inches of that high elf prince. That's pretty nice. So these units are going to be some spearmen and archers. They're going to take damage. They're going to fail battle shock tests. If you don't have some ability to imbue immunity to them, you're going to have that +2 bravery, which is going to help mitigate it. But if there is a case where you have to take battle shock tests, you're not going to lose as many guys. Martial prowess. All right, you in this case, you once per turn, when one of the units from the Glittering Host finishes its attacks in combat, you pick a second unit from the battalion to pile in and make attacks. All right, you can't pick a unit that has already made attacks, and the unit that you pick cannot make attacks later. You're basically getting a quicker action in the combat phase than you might have before. That can make a big difference because it's less guys attacking you back. So that's another nice ability for the Glittering Host. Is it the one that I would look to and say, I got to take this? Probably not. But if you take this combination, it's going to make them that much better. So I don't mind it. I just don't think it's over overkill dramatic and has it doesn't have all the bells and whistles. But you're going to have those units if you've come into Warhammer from any previous edition.
Yeah, I think you picked up on something really important there, and that is that you're going to put banners into these units to make their normal mediocre bravery of a 6 boost up to an 8, and then you're going to re-roll. So your chances of losing extra models are pretty slim there. So you're going to be a resilient battalion in doing so.
All right, the creme de la creme, the one that people are going to have nightmares about when they think of the High Elves, the Dragon Host.
Well, this is a beefy battle scroll of 3 models: the Prince, the Mage, and the Dragon Mage, all riding dragons, of course. We talked a little bit before about how frightening the Mortal Wound Dragon Breath goes, but the bonus that you get here is if you want to concentrate fire, then instead of it being 1, die 3, or die 6 for each of your dragons that breathe fire, you just simply become die 6, 2 die 6, or 4 die 6 mortal wounds on a single unit if you concentrate dragon fire on them.
The gash is going to go down in 1 turn, man.
Oh boy. Oh boy. And with the maneuverability of these things, if you want to target something, you're going to target something.
Right? Oh, good. I'm just going to stop sharing because I can't look at it. Oh man.
There is one other one here, Mitch, that's not on your PDF battle scroll, but came in the app. And I'll share this one real quickly.
Yeah. I
won't be able to show it up on your screen, but I'll quickly run over it. It's called Althrin's Stormrider Host. So this is led by the Prince on Griffin. It includes a High Elf Mage, a unit of Reavers, a unit of Sword Masters, and a unit of Sea Guard.
Nice.
So it's a fair mix of guys, but what this truly is the contents of the Island of Blood box.
Right. I didn't even think about that.
That's exactly what that is. Okay. So the abilities that they get, the one is called the Bond of Fellowship. So Prince Althran and his High Elf Mage have been comrades forever, etc., 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 blah, blah, blah. You can reroll hits, wounds, and save rolls for any heroes in this whilst they are within 10 inches of one another. So your 2 heroes in here, as long as they hang out and be buddies, they will be superstar buddies.
Love it. Love it. Oh man, that's awesome. All right.
And then one other thing about heroic valor is that all the units add 1 to their bravery while the prince on his Griffin is still alive.
Excellent. So let's sum this up because we're right at the finish line here. I think that the High Elves, from my standpoint, you can get the last word on it. I think they're just as deadly, just as crazy, just as awesome, and they have different mechanics. There's some units I think that have risen in their stock. I don't think anything is really lowered in its stock. They're very fast. They have some tremendously hard-hitting mechanics. And come on, they've got dragons. And I don't care what your thought is about comp, guys. 3 dragons on the table. That's what Age of Sigmar is about. But picking what you want, playing what you want, and just really having a nice time with whatever models you think look the coolest. And honestly, those 3 dragons, they're tough. But I got to tell you, there's things that can counter them. And in each army, there are things that they can counter. They're scary. They're really scary. But it's not it's not invincible. But it is scary. So, last word, Kieran. Overall thoughts?
Well, I think I want to say a couple things. First, I think they've done a good job of capturing the flavor and the heroes of the High Elves. I said it in the opening when I was talking about princes, how they reflect their dodginess and hard to hit by having the rerolls and their armor saves. I think they've also reflected that in the magic, that they have anti-magic, and that carries over into the Anointed, that he's a hero, not a wizard, that is able to unbind spells. They've kept up with the elite infantry, and all those are on par. And then as far as flipping from power to non-power, I think obviously the Sea Guard stuff with the Sea Helm that we hit on up at the end are real big winners. The Flame Spire Phoenix is absolutely terrifying. And I will use both of those things all of the time.
Yeah, me too. I'm gonna have to look at, I'm gonna have to look at my selections on the next wave of buys and consider. I think I'm gonna see if there were any Flame Phoenixes on the shelves of stores. I think they're starting to fly off at this point. All right, Kieran, thank you, man. Thank you so much for joining me. I'd like to do another round and have you on board for, a follow-up to this. We'll talk about special characters and other synergies with other armies. But I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Thanks again.
Yeah, I had a fun time with you, and now I'm going to go away and arrange some Age of Sigmar games with Sea Helms.
Cool. And hey, everybody tuning in, thanks for doing so, and have a great day.